So this video is designed to be an overview on some of the main features of Novation's Launchpad. Just before we take a look at those, I want to tell you how to set the device up in the first place. So what you need to do first of all is to install the software that ships with the Launchpad itself, and that's on a CD. If you don't have that CD to hand, you can download the latest drivers from the Novation website. You need to install those first of all, start Ableton Live, open the preferences, and navigate to the MIDI sync tab. So if you want the Launchpad to behave as it was designed to behave with this two-way visual feedback, you can see you've got the yellow box on session view in front of you. You've got various buttons lit up, corresponding buttons lit up on the device itself. Then what you need to do is go to the control surface, choose a menus at the top and select Launchpad. And once it's plugged into the computer, from the input and output chooser boxes, you'll also be able to select Launchpad. Just take a look above that. You can see I previously selected an APC40, which isn't currently plugged into my computer, and that's why that writing there is in red. It means I've selected it previously, but it's not currently plugged in. And if you have never selected Launchpad before and it's not plugged in, then you won't be able to select Launchpad from that input or output chooser menu. So to cut a long story short, plug your Launchpad in, install your software and select Launchpad, Launchpad, Launchpad. What you could also choose to do is down here under MIDI ports, navigate to where it says Input, Launchpad, and you might want to choose to select the track button and the remote button. Just turn those on. That means that the Launchpad will transmit MIDI notes, which we can use to trigger MIDI instruments, which we'll look at momentarily. And also remote, that means we can use the Launchpad to make manual MIDI mappings as well, and control different aspects of Ableton Live's interface over and above being able to control session view automatically. So again, we'll take a look at that momentarily. So with the device correctly set up, let's look at the first of 4 banks of controls on the Launchpad. So this first button here is called Session. Now with the device set up correctly, this allows us to immediately take hands-on control of all the clips that we've got on the go in session view. So you see you've got that 8x8 yellow box on the session view in front of you. You've also got 8x8 buttons here, 8x8 corresponding buttons, so we can trigger clips using this 64 button matrix. To navigate your way around the session view, so you're not limited to just that one set of 8x8 clips, you can use these buttons here, these arrow buttons. So obviously you've got up and down, and you've got left and right. At the moment I've only got 8 tracks on the go in session view, so I don't necessarily need to navigate left or right, but you can see how the buttons in front of me here are changing dynamically as I move through session view. So what's in front of you is exactly corresponding with what you've got going on in session view. So different colours. Let's talk about the different colours of buttons that you can potentially have. The first, you can see there's a load of blank buttons here, no coloration, and that indicates an empty clip slot. The next colour you can see is amber. Now this indicates that there is some sort of clip loaded into that slot, but it's not currently playing. What we can do is press one of these buttons and it will trigger the corresponding clip. That brings us on to the next colour you can see, which is green. That indicates there's a clip loaded into that slot and that it is in fact playing. So the Launchpad works in exactly the same way as session view. If you wanted to stop this clip playing from this track, you would press one of the empty clip slots and it will stop at the next value of launch quantization, which I've got set to 1 bar, the default value of 1 bar. Now just let me arm this 4th track along. And let's take a look at the final colour of button that you'll see. If I just launch one of the clips from the 4th track, you can see we've got a red button that indicates that that clip, we're currently recording information onto that clip. Again, just the same as session view. If you want that to cease recording, immediately start looping and playback, you would just press that button again. Obviously, if I then disarm that track, that button would go back to green. So you can see I've got a few ideas on the go here in session view, and I'm just going to show you how this session bank of controls really speeds up your workflow compared with just using the mouse. The other MIDI controller you can see here is a fader Fox, and I've just mapped out volumes for the 3 tracks. I've got a simple filter and delay on there as well.
Sunlight hits my eyes, and something that I wanna know. There's heavy on my mind. I fly like people, get high like planes. If you catch me at the border, I'll have visas in my name. If you come around here, I'll make them all day. I get one down in a second if you wait. I fly like people, get high like planes. If you catch me at the border, I'll have visas in my name. If you come around here, I'll make them all day. I get one down in a second if you wait. What's the JB? What's the what's back? JB's game plan. We don't stop. Whip it up. What's the back? Set it up. Set it. 'Cause I'm a Joey brother. True blue brother.
So the next 2 pages of controls transmit MIDI notes. They're called user 1 and user 2. I'm just going to press user 1. You see all those buttons have gone out now. Now you've got 2 columns of note pitches. So this is the lowest pitch here, and then you've got semitone, 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 and so on and so forth, all the way up that first column. And then once you get up here, you start down here and the pitch ascends up to the top right. So again, if I go back in and arm that Mr. Scruff track, in fact, let's just take a look at the track view. you can see on that track I've got loaded a drum rack, and in the drum rack I've sliced up an audio sample using the slice to new MIDI track function. And when I've got user 1 selected and the track's armed, I can trigger see I've got a little bit of delay on there. But essentially I can trigger that MIDI instrument. It doesn't necessarily have to be a drum rack. Well, the Launchpad is great for jamming out beats. You can control any virtual or hardware MIDI instrument because all it does is transmit MIDI notes. So I'm just going to go back to session. Just pick something slightly different. Turn the tempo up a little bit. Move back over to user 1. Now you could use the next page along to make some MIDI mappings. So let me just start a couple of the other tracks playing. Now I've mapped out these very bottom left buttons out to be the track status display for the 3 tracks that I've got playing. So whatever's playing, I can use those 3 buttons to skip between, see whereabouts I am in the track. The next 3 buttons up, I've got mapped out to loop position, loop length, and this turns the loop on and off. So you can hear I've just looped up that Mr. Scruff track there. Just turn the loop off there with that button. So that can all be done in MIDI map mode, and you've got 64 buttons there to map out to whatever you want. And the final page of controls is this button called Mixer. So I'm going to press that, and you see all the lights become illuminated. Now down the right hand side here, we've got various mixer parameters that we can take control of with the Launchpad. So although it is lacking these continuous faders and rotary controls that are good for perhaps changing the extent of an effect as I've been doing, or adjusting volumes, etc., you can do rudimentary volume fades. So let me just press this very top right hand button, volume. Now this is the volume for each of the first 8 tracks, or the tracks that you've got the yellow box around on the session view. You see at the moment tracks 1, 2 and 3 are at minimum volume. If I just use the fader there, you can see that's me turning the volume up and down with a continuous control. But you can perform, albeit slightly blocky, you can perform volume fades by turning these buttons on and off. You can see how that's affecting the fader on session view there. So not quite as smooth as a fader, but you can perform a volume fade nevertheless. Next button down, panning. You can see if the 2 buttons are lit up along the middle like that, then that track is panned centrally. Buttons north of that, and you pan something round to the right. South of that, and you pan around to the left. You can see how that's affecting the panning of track 1. Again, not smooth, but you can still do it nevertheless. It's a similar idea for send levels. You've got two send level, send A and B. Let me just press the mixer button again. These last four behave slightly differently. Go to mixer. Let's have a look at stop here. So these are the individual track stop buttons. So if you don't have any spare clip slots available to stop your track, you press mixer and then you stop the relevant track. If you press the stop button itself over here on the right, then that is a stop all clips function, so we can stop everything that's playing immediately. We've got track activator or mute buttons if you prefer to think of it like that, and then if we actually press the it's called track on button, watch what happens. Everything becomes active again, nothing is muted. Now with solo, you can solo individual tracks like that. If you hold down multiple buttons, then you can solo multiple tracks, and again this solo button over here on the right will de-solo any tracks that are soloed. And it's the same for record arm down here. You can see track 4 is armed. I can turn that on and off with that button, and this button over here removes the arm from any track. So that in a nutshell is Novation's Launchpad. Quite a versatile little device, very cost-effective way of making the Ableton Live Session View a much more tactile, hands-on way of working. So you've got the Session View, which allows you to control all the clips that you might have present in Session View. You've got 2 pages which transmit MIDI notes, which you can use to control instruments, or you can map those buttons out to control any element of Live's interface. And then you've got some rudimentary mixer controls, which, although it's not continuous movement like you've got with this Fader Fox, if this is the only MIDI controller that you have, then you can still do volume fades, etc. with that.